If you're a female runner and lately you've been thinking, why does this feel harder? Why am I more tired? Why is my pace slipping even like when you're training just as hard? You're not crazy. You're not losing fitness. You are definitely not alone. There's a conversation we don't have enough in the running world about hormones, perimenopause, and how a woman's body changes in her 30s and 40s, and sometimes even earlier. And instead of fighting those changes, what if we train smarter because of them? Today, I'm joined by our newest Spark Healthy Runner coach, Emily Fox. Emily is a UESCA Certified Running Coach, Academy of Sports Medicine Certified Personal Trainer, a yoga instructor. With over a decade of running experience, she specializes in helping female runners, especially those who are navigating pre and post menopause, stay strong, injury-free, and confident while continuing to chase PRs. She lives in South Bend, Indiana with her two daughters and is a marathoner at heart who loves the grit and growth the distance demands. Emily, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today. Thank you for joining the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited, but let's start here. For women listening who may be wondering if this applies to them, what exactly is perimenopause and when might runners actually start noticing changes?
Yeah, so perimenopause can start as early as your early 30s. And I know that sounds amazingly early. I initially thought it didn't start until your 40s or even 50s.
Right.
It kind of took me a little bit by surprise when I started experiencing those symptoms in my mid to late 30s. But it's a change in the hormones. Basically, the estrogen and the progesterone begin to drop about that time. And that's when we start to see a lot of changes. And it can be really frustrating for anybody, but especially as a female athlete. That's kind of, when some questions start to arise.
Yeah, what are some of those like earliest signs that runners tend to overlook?
I think just the energy level. It's kind of when we start to see some sleep disturbances. Maybe we're waking up during the night a little bit more, and at least for me, it was not extremely noticeable right away. It kind of just gradually happened. So, you don't sleep very good, and then you feel like your training isn't going well, and it just kind of compiles and compiles. And then, the weight kind of starts to creep up a little bit as well. So it just kind of, you start to feel not as vibrant.
Hmm. Okay. I'm sure there are probably a lot of runners right now saying like, "Hey, is this me?" And maybe wondering a little bit more. And like you've worked with so many female runners, and you're a mom and a marathoner yourself. So when did you really start realizing that this was something women needed more support with?
Yeah, I think it was really in coaching, working with groups of athletes, and I had females and males, but particularly females that were kind of in their 30s and 40s, and even beyond that. I just noticed it seemed like they were kind of going in these waves with their training, where they'd be doing really well for a couple of weeks, and then they might hit some struggles. And I know I started kind of experiencing that myself. So I just felt like there really was not a lot of information out there for female athletes in general. And there's definitely, whether you're in perimenopause or pre-perimenopause, there's always kind of this ebb and flow of just working with the cycle too. And I do wish that there was more information out there for female athletes and how to work through that in a training cycle, and be patient with body and really listen to the body rather than maybe be so self-critical.
Right. Yeah. And I would imagine you started feeling some of this in your running journey personally. And how many, I know you mentioned you like running the marathon distance. Is that your favorite distance to run? Or do you
Oh,
prefer
yeah.
halves? Okay. So you prefer the marathon. How many marathons have you done?
Oh, I think I'm around 10 right now.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's legit. Double digits. You have a lot more than me right now under my belt. I'm at 7. So you got me beat there. All right.
Doing a
And
lot of over and
like, were
over
you
though.
always a runner, or did you take on running like later in life?
I didn't really start running more consistently until after having my first daughter. She was born in 2014. So she actually just turned 12. And I started with triathlon. So I wasn't going the distance that I am now. It was definitely more of like 2, 3 mile runs, maybe 4 mile runs. That was kind of my maximum. And then in 20, no, started 2020, that was when I really got the interest in marathon. And unfortunately, the first marathon I signed up for ended up getting pushed back a whole year. And so it was a long training cycle.
Yeah, that year, I think we all remember quite vividly. So you had this long training cycle, training for that first marathon. And yeah, what do you love most about the marathon?
I think it's just the determination. It's the, you know, I've been through harder things in life. And I feel like, not that the marathon is easy, but it's kind of finding that power within of, I've been through all of these things, but yet, this is a whole different hard. I've really loved the friendships that I've made throughout it too. It's been so rewarding, such a life-changing experience.
Yeah, yeah, the training and the community that you develop on people who that you're training with, or even now, even with social media, right? Like being able to connect with like other people, maybe even doing the same race that you're doing, and seeing like, hey, okay, this person's like getting after it, getting this long run in. It kind of brings some like camaraderie into it, where you're not alone, right? Yeah, I'm kind of in that season of my running journey as well, where kind of embracing the marathon, and that's kind of my current conquest, and just looking to improve and stay healthy, and kind of continuing to improve in that journey in my mid 40s, and try to get the best out of myself. But as we kind of get into today's topic, and you mentioned starting to feel like fatigue. Are there any other common changes that you see in female runners as they really move into perimenopause?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, yeah, the energy and kind of dealing with that.
Could I bring one up that I feel like a lot of women don't mention, but I know they probably are thinking about it, is body composition changes, right?
Yes.
Like that could be a common one, right? That someone might just attribute it to like, oh, I have to eat less carbs, or maybe I need to eat less because my metabolism's slowing down as I age, right? Or right, they start to get some of those thought processes. I feel like are common ones.
Yeah, yeah, the weight changes are a big one. And that's another one that it was so frustrating for me to see the weight kind of just gradually start to creep up and go, gosh, I don't understand this. I eat fairly clean. I am running 6 days a week. There's really nothing that's changed, and you start to really question yourself and go, what's going on? But yeah, the loss in muscle and the feeling like you're getting more around your midsection is really common.
Hmm. And I know I've talked to Brooke, our registered dietitian on our team, about this in previous episodes that we've done, where she sees that all the time. And then she finds a lot of her women runners start to restrict, and they restrict more. And this actually leads to underfueling, even though you think, right, like, hey, you should just be maybe taking in less because your body is changing as you age, and that winds up really creating some negative consequences in terms of like running performance and trying to actually get faster or stay healthy. Because if we're under fueling chronically, then that actually opens the door to actually getting a common running related injury. So I think that's something that maybe people might not think about related to perimenopause and related to the hormone changes that are actually occurring in your body that is completely normal. Are there any other common changes that you think is worth mentioning?
I mean, not really as a runner. I know I've heard like there could be changes in like facial hair and things like that, but I mean, that's frustrating on a whole different level. But um, otherwise, yeah, it's mostly the weight, the energy, your body kind of feels a little achy and stiff. And, I noticed like my mobility changed quite a bit as well. And it's just really trying to figure out why.
Yeah, feeling stiffer. And I know earlier you mentioned also sleep, right? Disruption, and that changes, right? You're not getting as quality and as good sleep during the night. But yeah, I think that those are all the big things that I hear from my women athletes. And then I would say maybe even just like pace shifts, right? And just maybe not being able to run at a certain pace that you were used to doing, right? And it could just be part of these changes that are, again, normal, happening within your body. So how should like female runners think about training around their cycles? And this is something I quite frankly know really nothing about here, but I am a dad of daughters, and I have I have a wife who runs, so I should probably know a little bit more about this. But yeah, how should like female runners think about training around their cycle, and then how does that change in perimenopause?
Yeah, so that's kind of going back to your question earlier, and when I started noticing these changes. Personally, I noticed that leading up to my cycle, I'm kind of in that like luteal phase where your energy really drops. It was really hard to hit the paces that I was trying to hit in my tempo runs and in my speed work. And I used to run with a lot of males. So we go out on our runs together, and I would get done with my run, and they're all going, "This is great. I feel amazing." And I'm going, "Gosh, guys, like this just isn't, today did not go well." And then I realize, oh, okay, well, I'm 2 days before my cycle's going to start. Well, that's probably why. So I think just being aware of your cycle, definitely keeping track of it if you can. I know not all of us are super regular, which that adds a whole another uh, layer of something to kind of just keep track of and be aware of. Um, but yeah, if you can keep track of your cycle and kind of just know, okay, I'm heading into that luteal phase. My energy is going to drop. It's going to shift. Um, I don't want to say not to do the speed work, but really check in with yourself. It's okay that you're feeling like that energy is kind of coming down. And it's okay if you feel like, maybe you can't hit your paces that you could have hit or you were hitting a week or two ago. That doesn't mean that there's something wrong with your training. It doesn't mean that you're not pushing hard enough. But can you kind of really take a step back and look at where you're at in your cycle? Look at how you've been sleeping. Look at what's your diet like too, and almost remove that personal aspect of it. I know sometimes we can be really hard on ourselves.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So, from what I'm hearing here, is the luteal phase is a critical phase where you wind up feeling the most fatigue in your training. So, it is really important to adjust expectations, right? In terms of like performance. And if you do have a speed day, maybe have some grace with yourself, right? And if you're not able to hit the same pace or hold that pace for the whole duration of your interval or of your tempo run than you were the previous week, like have some grace with yourself and be like, okay, I'm in my luteal phase. Like this is normal, right? This is when my energy levels aren't going to feel the greatest. And you know what? I'm going to go on rating of perceived exertion versus like tie myself to the number on my watch and like, beat myself up if I didn't hit the number on the watch. That these are all kind of normal changes. And that's kind of the time of the cycle when you are going to feel that most fatigue. And yeah, just adjusting your intensity level during that time period is kind of what I'm hearing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And you really can you can work with your coach on this, work around that cycle too. Once you can kind of identify that, when that time's coming, maybe the tempo run or the speed run is going to look a little bit different for those couple of weeks. And then, as you're going through more of that higher energy stage, the ovulation and the follicular stage, kind of, like right after that menstrual cycle, then that's the time to pick up that training. So I really think for female athletes, I would love to see a training approach that works more around that cycle for that specific athlete.
Yeah, and like that might be a great week to have a quote unquote recovery week, right? A down week in training where it doesn't necessarily progress in your training, but we actually regress it just a little bit. And that just gives your body a chance to absorb the training. So it's not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing. Everyone needs to do that during a training cycle. So it seems to me that the most important time to do that would be during that luteal phase, to have that kind of down week, recovery week, where body can absorb training. And then it's like the next week you're able to like, continue to move forward. Yeah. So I also want to talk about a subject that I'm very passionate about, which is strength training in order to run. So let's talk about strength training. Like, why does it become even more important during perimenopause?
Yeah. So that is one big piece that I think would be important to incorporate as you move into perimenopause in your training. Really, it's important for all runners, of course, but really being diligent with that as you move into perimenopause, and that's going to help support you in the long run. It's going to help build that bone density, but it also what happens is as you move into that perimenopause, and especially closer and closer to menopause, your estrogen and your progesterone are just going to continue to drop over time. So by adding at least a couple days of strength training in a heavier lift and making sure that you're getting enough protein for your body as well, that is going to help kind of interrupt that. It won't keep the estrogen levels up, but it's more or less going to force the body to not have the hormonal response, but more of a nerve response. So you're going to need that muscle in order to help support your running and keep those energy levels up.
Right. So with the changes in hormone levels, specifically like estrogen, I know is a big one that does put you at more like risk of losing muscle. So we basically want to counteract the loss of muscle with strength training, right? so we can actually maintain our muscle so we don't lose them, because we know if we lose muscle and we keep running, then we're going to set ourselves up for injury. So it's that much more important to add strength training in for, like what you said, the bone density benefit. I know it can also help with like insulin sensitivity, metabolic health. And I love the fact that you talked about like actually lifting heavier as well. What does like quote unquote heavy actually mean for a runner?
Yeah. So there's a lot of talk around that as well. But as you move into perimenopause, it's important to keep your repetitions, which is, how many times I'm lifting a weight, how many times I'm doing a bicep curl, for example, lower and the weight heavier. So I would suggest starting with, and it depends on your background as well, but maybe starting with 6 to 8 weeks of strength training where, maybe you are doing more closer to 6 to 8 reps, maybe even up to 10 repetitions. And the weight might be a little bit lighter to make sure that you're really getting that form down and you're getting a feel for that exercise. But then beyond that, can you up the weight and lower the repetitions? So maybe my first set, I'm going to start with a maximum of 8 repetitions. The second time I do that bicep curl, I'm going to go, okay, maybe I put a little bit more weight on there and I'm only getting 6 repetitions. And then the third time I'm getting 3 or 4 repetitions, but again, with good form. And it really helps build that muscle.
Yeah, I love that you emphasize that form and quality of movement is just as important as adding the load. And I think that message gets lost. And the other message that I see gets lost in a lot of the injured runners that I quite frankly wind up seeing from like a physical therapist standpoint is we just jump right into heavy lifting because we heard like that's what we should be doing as middle-aged female runners is lift heavy. And I got to prevent the muscle loss. But if you're starting from a point that you haven't been doing strength training, then I start to see a lot of tendon overuse injuries because now we've lifted heavy, but we really didn't have the foundation established first. So, we are big proponents within our program of like learning how to, number one, activate the correct muscles. So we get, like you said before, the nerve signals sending from the brain to the muscles to be like, hey, this is how we actually activate our side hip muscles. And we're using them properly without compensating with other muscles. And then we progressively load the tissue, meaning the muscle, the tendon, to allow the body to adapt. Just like running, right? We wouldn't go from couch potato, like not running at all, to running 50 miles a week, right? So why would you go from like not strength training to going in the gym and throwing like 200 pounds on the leg press machine because you heard that that's like what women runners should be doing is lifting heavy, right? So I just want to caution you all to think about progression. And yes, the goal is to lift heavier, but you need to gradually build that up so your body can actually tolerate those demands and you don't wind up, getting a tendon overuse injury in your Achilles and, your patellar tendon or, get some bursitis in your hip. So like those are the common things that I wind up seeing in female runners who kind of ramp up too quickly and they just like start a new heavier lifting program. So I love that you kind of talked about that progressive overload and that, like a lot of people skip the progressive part. And yeah, there's a lot of people who just stay at one area and they just do like the same exercise for like years on end, right? So the progression is key to kind of preventing that like muscle from breaking down. Yeah.
I think as female athletes, a lot of times we're afraid to lift heavy too. And
So you're gonna get big
that,
muscles.
yeah, I think we're all afraid we're going to end up
You're gonna
like
get too
Arnold
bulky.
Schwarzenegger, but
Yeah.
that's really, really hard to do as a female. It's, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's nearly impossible. the benefit in lifting heavier and less repetition is just huge. I think that you'll see such a big difference in your energy levels, especially if you are going through that perimenopause phase and you feel like, you're tired, you're fatigued, maybe you're not able to hit the paces like you used to. That's really going to help benefit you in the long run and even out that energy. And hopefully, ideally your paces would get better, right? Because you have more strength. You just have more muscle to be able to go on those runs.
Right, right. And I'm sure this is a phrase like you've heard before. If a runner says to you, "I feel slower, I feel a little softer than I used to," like what would you tell her?
Yeah, I would tell her that's normal. And, it is something that happens as females as we kind of work through this stage, but that there are things that can be done. Um, Again, really refocusing on that diet a little bit. Are we eating clean? Are we getting enough protein? And when I say enough protein, I know I kind of referred to that a little bit earlier as well. Um, I really like to use the rule of thumb of 1 gram per pound of body weight. I've heard anywhere between like 0.8 or 80% of to 1 gram. So that's kind of a good measure to use there. Um, but again, like incorporating that strength training, just kind of empathizing with her and letting her know this is normal, but it is not something that is going to end her running career, right? If anything, it's going to make her better. So
Hmm.
it's just
Right. So
shifting
looking
that
at the
focus.
challenge of it and trying to find out ways that we can incorporate other forms of training, whether it is adding in strength training, whether it is adding in specific types of runs, right? Like different types of run plan or, training plan than they were used to doing in the past, that they can kind of optimize in those ways. That this is a period of change and it is a matter of, looking at this as like this is a challenge, right? And it reframes almost like strength as a power, right? And kind of builds confidence through getting stronger, right? And through being able to like overcome some of these challenges as do feel like you're slowing down. But I'm hearing from you is also like, yeah, have some grace. You don't need to beat yourself up at all. And there are different seasons of life and different seasons of running journeys. Okay. All right. I love it. And yeah, you started talking about nutrition. And making sure protein intake is high. And I'm assuming that's really because protein's the building blocks of our muscles. And if there's going to be like muscle loss that's associated with hormone changes, then we need to make sure. And if we're doing strength training, we're running, we're using our muscles, we need to like rebuild those muscles with higher protein needs. Any other like nutrition shifts that you think are important for females to know? Or like maybe mistakes that they commonly make?
Yeah. I think we're all subject to that, but especially, as I'm thinking about the cycle and everything and, going in those hormone shifts. I know for me, I always want to reach for the candy, for the chocolate, the sugar, all the junk. And sadly, as we move into perimenopause and menopause, we can't get away with things like we used to. Um, Same with your sleep, right? But just I don't want it to be impossible to maintain a healthy diet, right? It can't be, hey, I'm really cutting the calories down and I'm going to remove all the sugar and I'm going to be quote unquote good. It's just so hard to maintain for anybody. But how can I maintain a healthy diet long term? So maybe looking at what are some things that I like to eat that are whole foods, maybe more like chicken breast, getting the fruits and the veggies in the diet, making sure that you're getting enough fiber, especially as you're eating more protein, and more looking at the diet from the aspect of, what am I eating and what is the benefit of that to me? If I'm sitting there eating a Reese's, right, there's not probably any benefit to me besides maybe it just feels good. But if I have maybe a nice salad in front of me that's got some quinoa in it, it's got some, chicken on it and some beets and, all these things that I know, okay, this is giving me the protein that I need. This is giving me some nutrients that are going to help fuel my body. And as you get used to that, you can look back in time and go, oh my goodness, I feel so much better now. Because you're really filling your body with, everything that it needs to succeed.
Hey runner, want 4 free gels? Did you know that proper nutrition is one of the 6 steps to growing in your running journey? So if you've never eaten anything for your runs, or you've tried other gels, but you just didn't like the taste or quite frankly, the texture, or you always get stomach discomfort whenever you try to fuel your workouts, it's time to give UCAN a try. It is the fuel that allowed me to crush a 23-minute marathon PR, and UCAN is what powered my 48.6 magical miles in Disney as part of the Dopey Challenge. The top US marathon runners, whether it's Emily Sisson, Sarah Hall, or Emma Bates, all use UCAN to power their workouts and their runs, but it's not just for elite runners. As a running physical therapist and coach, it is my go-to recommendation for the athletes I work with. Now, UCAN is offering our Spark Healthy Runner community an exclusive chance to try 4 Edge samples for free. All you do is pay the cost of shipping. So just head over to ucan.co/healthy runner to claim this offer, or just drop UCAN in the comments and I'll shoot you the special link. And while you're over there, you might as well grab a box of energy bars. Salted peanut butter is my favorite, and I have it after my runs and before my strength sessions. As always, let's maintain a strong mind, a strong body, and let's just keep on running, powered by UCAN. All right. So the moral of the story is basically we want to avoid restricting, but also making sure that we're taking in the proper fuel for recovery during this time period. Okay. As we kind of shift gears to that sleep issue, which it can be a common problem for many runners, whether they're male or female, but sleep gets harder for many women in this stage. How does that impact performance and recovery?
Yeah, that's I definitely still struggle with this. But it's so important because if we're not getting enough sleep, we likely are not going to want to train. Um, Hitting the paces that maybe we're looking for becomes more difficult, but then also your risk of injury just skyrockets. So it's really, really important to pay attention to that sleep. But I also realize that age that most of us are going through, perimenopause, we have little kids, right, that we're running to practice here, there, and everywhere. Maybe, some of them are still coming in our rooms at night. And, I know for me personally, I'm up quite early so that I can get myself up and around for work before even getting the kids up and around. And that's not even my run. So I think it's really important to pay attention to and try to make adjustments where we can. And I know that sounds like, okay, well, yeah, in a perfect world, right? But, things like limiting the screen time. I just moved, and this was great for my daughter too, my 12-year-old. I moved all of our chargers out to my living room. Nobody has phones in their room. Nobody has a TV in their room. So, really checking your sleep environment. Is it too hot in the room? Did I have a glass of wine before bed. Alcohol is another big one that's going to raise that core body temperature and make it harder to sleep. Hey, there's so many things. I know, like, I incorporated taking magnesium even before bed because that really helps
Yeah,
with the
same.
recovery. But yeah, and then also I'm ready for bed then.
Right. Right. So improving that quality of sleep, because we don't get good quality sleep. So trying to maximize, right, all the things that we could do to have good sleep hygiene, and create that environment that allows our bodies to shut down. The moral of the story is that if we don't get good sleep, our stress hormone, which is cortisol, increases. And we know that whenever we have increased cortisol levels in our body, that does increase the injury risk. So if you're training hard, you're running, we have increased cortisol, then we're opening ourselves up for having like more of that injury risk. Not to even, mention the fact that when we don't sleep, like our moods are terrible, right? We're like short with people. Our family members don't really think we're the nicest people. It's going to affect your mood. It's going to put you at a more increased risk for recovery. And obviously, we're all about preventing injuries here on the Healthy Runner podcast. And, we don't want you in like this recovery debt, right? If you're not getting good sleep, it is going to really affect your ability to recover from the training that you're doing. And we only can train as hard as we can recover from that training. So it is normal to, for sleep to be harder. I think you just need to maybe do strategies that you didn't have to do in your 20s, right? And like all the great things that Emily suggested, I would highly recommend in terms of like screen time, calming the brain. I'm a big fan of guided meditations, even if it's just 5 minutes. Doing that, sleep masks, right? Like things that can really help calm you down before bedtime, so you could get a little bit better quality of sleep, because it really will help you in your training from performance aspect, but then also from like an injury prevention standpoint. And you mentioned being a busy mom, raising kids. And for someone who is like advancing their career, right? Like juggling all the things. In your mind, what does self-care look like in this season of life?
Hmm. Yeah, you really, it's so hard to say as a mom, right? Because you're giving, 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 right? You're always pouring from your cup. But how can you give back to yourself too? Again, really prioritizing your sleep. You almost have to protect your sleep a little. It's okay if that looks like going to bed early, and maybe somebody can help you get the kids to bed early, right? Maybe the kids are old enough that they can be respectful and put themselves to bed at a decent time. Um, Looking at it from the aspect of I am filling my cup with things like eating healthy, right? That eating clean. I'm really, you know what? I'm going to make myself a beautiful meal that is good for me. It's going to make me feel good. I'm going to, like you said, do the meditation and the skincare, whatever your routine is before bed, and make sure that I am getting enough sleep if I can. um, just really looking at ways that how can I feel at my best so that I can continue training healthfully, right? But I can show up as the best version of myself for my family and ultimately really for you, right? For yourself as a whole. How can I take care of me? Because that's going to help in all the other areas of your life.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is like, how can you take care of me in this more holistic approach, right? And maybe thinking about quality over quantity. It's not a matter of like having X number of spa days or, alone time, but thinking about how can you, eat in a manner that is going to support the nutrients that you need as a runner, especially during this time period. How can you strengthen your body for longevity? How can you protect recovery and actually prioritize it, right? And think about it as an element of your training, just like you were to think about that long run that you have this weekend, right? And another, I think, self-care, I would say, is getting rid of the comparison trap, right? And that could be comparing yourself to your earlier self of what you did in your 20s, or could be comparing it to other women, that you're, lining up with, who's in your pack, whether it is the front of the pack, the back of the pack, the middle of the pack, and just getting rid of that comparison. Because if anything that I've seen, even with the women that I work with personally, and from just talking to many, women going through these changes, is that it is so individualized. So I think, just removing that comparison is a way that you can actually show that you are taking care of yourself. And yeah, removing some of that. So I know we kind of shared a lot of the, I guess, negative consequences they could be construed as during perimenopause, but I I don't want this to be perceived as like doom and gloom. Um, is perimenopause like a limitation in your mind, or is it like an opportunity to train smarter, right? And can women actually still get like PRs during this time period? What do you say to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, my experience has been that I have slowed down a bit, but it's not a doom and gloom. I look at it as it is a door or a window that's opening for me to really just clean things up a bit. Again, it's staying on top of the sleep and the nutrition, and you know maybe now I'm realizing how important it is to continue that strength training, so that in later years on, I've already been through all of this. I've already had that hurdle, and I am so thankful for it because it is going to make me a better athlete. And I mean, I know so many women that they've been through perimenopause and menopause, and they're qualifying for Boston. They're yeah, they are
Right.
doing amazing. They're stronger than their 20-year-old, 30-year-old selves. So no, it is not a doom and gloom. Oh my goodness, I'm never going to be the same. It might be hard for a while, but look at it as an opportunity to become a better version of yourself and learn a little bit more about yourself, and ultimately kind of get that edge as an athlete. um, and you talked about things kind of changing as the pace slows. The one thing I've loved about that too, if and when that does happen, I my friend group changed a lot when that happened too. So the people that I trained with before that, I still see and I still love, but I don't run with them as much anymore. But I started running with a whole different community and a whole different group of people. And oh my goodness, my friend circle just doubled.
Right.
So I'm grateful for like that aspect of it. There's so many positive things that can come from it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. So looking at those positives, and yeah, thank you so much for breaking this down today. I know there are like women listening to this right now who maybe feel seen for the first time in a really long time, especially like today's day and age of just, seeing on social media, people just all the highlights, right? The highlight reel, or people hitting PRs, and you think like, hey, like maybe, you're alone if you're been more tired than usual, or maybe your pace has shifted, or maybe your body feels different and you've quietly wondered like, is this just how it is now? And what I hope you hear from today's conversation is the fact that you're not broken, you're not past your prime, your best running is actually not behind you. And you just need a plan that reflects the season you're in right now. And if you're listening and thinking I want to feel strong again. I want to understand what's happening in my body. I want structure. I want strength training that actually supports my hormones. I want to stay injury free and keep chasing PRs. That's exactly why we built our one-on-one coaching program here at Spark Healthy Runner for our community. And Emily doesn't just understand perimenopause from a textbook. She is a UESCA Certified Running Coach, personal trainer, a mom balancing real life, and a marathoner who knows what it takes to build strength and resilience during this season. And now she's helping women do exactly that. So if you want personalized guidance, a strength forward run plan, accountability, and a coach who understands how hormonal shifts impact in training, then you can head to learn.sparkhealthyrunner.com/coaching and apply to work with our team. We've linked it in the description. You don't need to train harder. You need to train smarter. And your hormones are not your limitation. An outdated plan might be. So let's fix that. So now I want to know, what's your biggest shift in your running lately? Has it been energy? Has it been pace, recovery, body composition? If you're watching the video version of this, comment below. Because I always love to hear, the things that you're struggling with so we can be able to make content that is going to help you. And if you found this helpful, hit the like, subscribe so you don't miss future episodes where we help you train smarter, stay healthy, and keep chasing big goals. Emily, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to come on and share this wonderful information with our community.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been phenomenal. So good to see you. And now that you guys know more about running with perimenopause, you're ready to learn how to strengthen your body for better running with my 6-step plan. If you're listening to the podcast, queue up episode 253 on the Healthy Runner podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then just click the video that I have for you next. Now let's continue to grow a strong mind, a strong body, and just keep running. Until next time.